Right, here we go. Never done one of these before. Quality shit. Don't really know if you can even hear me. Don't know if I'm going to upload this to YouTube or just take it for personal use. But hey, here we go. Psychology A2. Unit 3, Gender. Nice pack here. Right. Section 1. Psychological explanations of gender development. Kohlberg's cognitive development theory. Kohlberg's theory of universal... Hey, that doesn't even make sense. Kohlberg's theory is a universal theory of gender development which argues that all children develop an understanding of gender in 3 distinct stages. Firstly, gender identity, then gender stability, and then gender constancy. Each stage has particular characteristics and occurs at specific ages. At each stage, the children's understanding of gender becomes more sophisticated as their cognitive abilities mature. This runs parallel with other types of cognitive development, like Piglet's theory of conservation, where you have the 2 glasses, and one's short and fat, and one's tall and thin, and pour it from one to the other, and then ask the child if it has the same volume, and below a certain age they'll say no. And then eventually they realise nothing's being lost, nothing's being gained, must have the same volume. Right, first stage, gender identity. By the age of 2 to 3 years, children can correctly identify themselves as a boy or girl when asked. The child will then start to use the label boy or girl to refer to other people. However, their understanding is limited of what it means to be a boy or a girl, and they do not understand that gender is usually permanent. Always find it funny when, you've got a little cousin that's male and he says that he's going to grow up to be a mummy. Genuinely thinks he could grow up to be a mummy. Gender stability, stage 2. At about 3 to 4 years, the child knows that gender is permanent and unchangeable, that they are a boy or a girl and that their sex will not change, that they were always male or female and they will grow up to be male or female. Just used the example about boy growing up to be a mummy. However, the child is still misled by superficial changes to appearance and may believe that changes to appearance, such as head shaving, mean that a woman becomes a man. To be honest, looking at some of the people around, can you blame them for being confused? Some women look like men, they've got no hair, no boobs. It's all weird, isn't it? I don't believe in it, whatever. Stage 3, gender constancy. Between 4 to 7 years, the child works out gender is constant, despite changes in appearance. This stage shows that the child has the ability to conserve, in Piglet's terms. They have the ability to know that despite superficial transformations of appearance, the underlying thing remains the same. The child understands that even if girls wear jeans or cut their hair short, they still remain girls. Kohlberg argued that once a child understands that their gender is constant, they become highly motivated to behave in a way that is expected of them as a boy or a girl. The theory predicts that children should pay attention to same-sex role models only after they have a full understanding of gender and a strong sense that it is for life, i.e. around the age of 5. Evaluation. Kohlberg's theory accurately identifies the ages at which children acquire different types of gender understanding. Support for gender identity stage. Thompson, 1975, gave children aged 2 to 3 a task involving sorting pictures, including pictures of themselves, which tested their ability to apply gender labels correctly to themselves and others. Next page. Findings. The children who were just 2 could identify different sexes correctly but struggled to label their own gender. The oldest children in the sample could apply gender labels correctly and recognise the category of gender they belonged to. These findings are consistent with Kohlberg's gender identity stage. Support for gender labelling stage. McConaughey, 1979. Found that when a doll was dressed in transparent clothes and there was a discrepancy between its clothing and its genitals, children in this stage, usually aged 3 to 4.5, decided on its sex on the basis of clothing rather than its genitals. These findings are consistent with Kohlberg's gender labelling stage. Don't know how many naked people, 4-year-olds have seen, so, but okay. Support for gender constancy stage. Slabby and Frame, 1975. Studied 2 to 5-year-olds some of whom had achieved gender constancy and some had not. The children were shown a short film on a split screen showing a man changing a tyre and a woman baking a cake. The amount of time that children's eyes were fixated on each side of the screen was measured. Slabby and Frey found that children with higher levels of gender constancy paid more attention to same-sex models, i.e. boys watched the tyre changing and girls watched the baking. Yeah, because all women love baking. Children who had not reached gender constancy were equally interested in both films. This shows that children who have reached gender constancy pay more attention to same-sex role models. Apparently so. Ooh, those lovely little IDAs you've got to keep at the end for top marks. Alternative approach support for theory. Kohlberg's work on gender development links with, I'm just calling him Piglet's theory, which also shows that cognitive development takes place in stages that are linked to age. Piglet proposed that between the ages of 7 to 11, children understand that number, weight and volume stay constant, despite changes in appearance. As this clearly links with Kohlberg's gender constancy stage, it increases the explanatory power of the theory. So basically, because the two theories are pretty consistent with each other and what they're suggesting, increases, the validity of their ideas. Ida. Cultural issues. Monroe et al. 1994. Showed that the sequence of the development of gender is similar in other cultures, like Kenya, Nepal, Belize and Samoa. This lends credibility to Kohlberg's claim that his stage theory of gender development related to cognitive maturation is a universal process, and more important than different social experiences in gender development. So yeah, happens all over the place, all at the same rate, pretty consistent. Shows that we're not just making this up and it's because of our dodgy culture. It's always good. Alternative approach challenge for theory. However, Kohlberg's claim that gender develops when the stage of constancy is reached is disputed by other theories and contradicted by evidence. In particular, Martin and Halvorson's gender schema theory suggests that children start to pay attention to same-sex models much earlier than Kohlberg thought. According to this theory, children construct simple gender schemas by around the age of 2. These drive the children's attention, making them pay attention to same-sex role models. Okay. New section. Martin and Halvorson, 1981. Gender schema theory. We have some strange writing and highlighter there that I can't read, so we'll just ignore that bit. Martin and Halvorson agree with Kohlberg that gender roles are driven by cognition, what the child thinks, but they argue that the process of gender development starts much earlier than Kohlberg proposed. They suggest that gendered behaviour is driven by schemas, basic sets of knowledge about something. Gender schemas are clusters of concepts, cognitive frameworks, concerning how males and females should behave. They help children organise and interpret their experiences and process new information. As the child develops, the schemas become more complex. According to gender schema theory, gender development starts when children are about 2 years old. At the age of 2, a child's gender schema is very simple, consisting of 2 groups, boys and girls. The child then identifies to which group they belong to, hopefully. This leads to the formation of an in-group, the child's own gender, and an out-group, the opposite gender. Boys have cooties! Once children have identified which group they belong to, male or female, gender schema theory argues that they focus their attention on their in-group and ignore anything they label as belonging to the other group. For example, boys seek out information about the behaviour of boys, what toys they should play with, what clothes they should wear. They actively ignore anything that they see as being for girls. Over time, their gender schemas progressively become more complex, so toys, games, sports, TV programs, school lessons and even musical instruments are categorised as right for boys, right for girls, or possibly right for either. Evidence! Early and rapid development of schema. Campbell and al., 2000 and more. 2000 and more? 2004 even. 56 toddlers studied at 2 years old and again at 3 years old took part in this study, I guess. This book was written shittily, very, very shittily. Each time the children were asked to pick out pictures from a picture book. This is assessment to the content of the child's gender schema at each age. The children were asked to find a picture of a boy/girl. This was a simple gender labelling task. Find a girl/boy's toy. This task was designed to see whether the child's schema included information about the kinds of toys that were suitable for their own group. At 2 years, about 50% of the children could correctly pick out the same-sex child, showing that they had developed a basic gender schema. They were unable to complete the second task. At 3 years, over 90% of children could pick out the same-sex child, and almost half could identify that a football was a boy's toy and a brush and comb set was a girl's. This study shows that the child's gender schema develops at a much younger age and rapidly becomes more complex, as Martin and Halverson predict. Importance of in-group outcomes. Radbard et al., 1986. 4 to 9-year-olds were told that certain gender-neutral items, like pizza cutters and burglar alarms, whatever were they thinking? God, yeah, burglar alarms, all for boys. Ew, don't want to touch that. Yeah, that's what I was on about now. They found that the children took a greater interest in the toys labelled as appropriate for the page. Their in-group, e.g., boys were more interested in items labelled as boys' toys. 1 week later, they were able to remember more details about in-group objects than out-group objects. Origin of gender schema. Tenenbaum and Lieper, 2002. I apologise for my terrible pronunciation of all these people's names, so don't trust me on it. Tenenbaum and Lieper carried out a meta-analysis of 43 studies with 10,193 participants and found a significant correlation between parents' schemas and their children's view about gender. These findings suggest that children absorb gender schemas from their parents in a subtle way. What they see around them every day, who does the housework, who goes out to work, may be absorbed as the norm. Some psychologists argue that parents' gender schemas are more influential in shaping children's views about gender than direct reinforcement or modelling from their parents. One strength of gender schema theory is that it helps understand why children's beliefs about sex roles are so resilient and rigid. It is believed because children only pay attention to those things which are consistent with and conform their schema and ignore evidence which does not fit with their gender schema. Well, that was really confusing and really badly written, but sentiments there, I guess. Ida! Nature-nurture is the chosen Ida for this section. Gender schema theory emphasises the importance of parents and peers in the formation and maintenance of gender schema. This contrasts with the biological approach, which emphasises the genetic, unchangeable nature of gender development. There is evidence for both sides of the argument, which is why the biosocial theory to gender development is increasingly popular. Recent refinements to the biosocial theory explore the interaction between biological and social influences. Erde 2000 suggests that biology sets the limit to the flexibility of gender by affecting how sensitive the child is to male or female gender schema. So basically how vulnerable your child is to outside information. If you're a really vulnerable child, you might accidentally turn into a woman or something. This is a really, really controversial video. I'm definitely not uploading this. That would be good. Section 2. Biological influences on gender. I guess this is a bit more exciting. Includes all the hormones and stuff. Just had a break to reply to my Snapchats, nobody even noticed. See, I move faster than the speed of light. Anyway, the role of hormones and genes in gender development. According to the biological perspective, biological sex produces gendered behaviour in an unproblematic way. Men and women act in masculine or feminine ways because their hormones and genes make them do so. Genes. The sex of a baby is determined at conception. An embryo has 23. You wouldn't even believe I was doing biology, would you? An embryo has 23 pairs of chromosomes, each pair Each pair is made up of one from the ovum and one from the sperm. The 23rd pair of chromosomes determines the sex of the embryo. If the embryo inherits an X chromosome from each parent, it will become a girl. If it inherits an X chromosome from the mother and a Y chromosome from the father, it will be a boy. Well, come on guys, let's face it has to get an X from the mother, so it's all whether the father gives it a Y or gives it an X. Hormones. At the start of development, male and female embryos are structurally identical. Between 4 and 8 weeks after conception, the gene on the 23rd chromosome instructs an area of tissue called the gonadal ridge to release hormones. In the male embryo, the gonadal ridge releases the hormone testosterone, which causes the embryo to develop testes. Without testosterone, the embryo will develop female sex organs. In the male embryo, testosterone, which acts on an area of the brain called the hypothalamus. Without this extra testosterone, the brain development would develop in the female form. I'm so retarded, I'm sorry, my reading is just... it's not great, is it? Come on guys, let's face it. From biological difference to gendered behaviour. In the womb, the developing baby is exposed to androgens, male hormones, and estrogens, female hormones, and it is the relative balance of hormones that is important. Under or overexposure to hormones during this critical period of development may influence later gender-related behaviour, e.g., too little testosterone may make boys less masculine, whereas too much testosterone, usually from the mother, God knows, all your fault, may lead to a girl fetus developing genitalia resembling a male. Oh dear. Oh very dear. Evidence! Ooh, animal research. Young, 1966, studied rats, a species in which males and females show very different sexual behaviours. Young gave doses of male hormone to female rats and vice versa during a critical period in their prenatal development and found that they showed reversed sexual behaviours. Animal studies. With animals, the experiment is able to systematically manipulate an IV, e.g., the amount of a particular hormone an embryo receives and observe the effects on behaviour. However, caution must be taken in generalising from animals to humans when considering something as complex as human sexual behaviour, which is also influenced by social and cultural factors. Apparently, some of the things I've seen I'd beg to differ. Psychologists have researched naturally occurring examples of people exposed prenatally to high levels of androgens. Hines, 2004, reviewed studies of girls with CAH, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, for those that are not familiar with all this jargon they throw at us. A variety of measures were used. Interviews, questionnaires, analysis of drawings, direct observation of play behaviour, and the studies were carried out in many countries. USA, Japan, Canada, UK, Germany, Sweden. Apparently. Findings! Girls with CAH show increased male-typical play behaviour, including preference for toys usually chosen by boys, e.g., vehicles and weapons. I quite liked swords when I was little, so I guess I'm a bit blokey. Increased preference for boys as playmates. Increased interest in rough and tumble play. However, although girls with CAH show preferences that are more male-typical than unaffected girls matched for age and background, they are not as male-typical as those of boy playmates. E.g., playmates. Unaffected children, 80 to 90%, choose playmates of the same sex, whereas girls with CAH do not show preference for one sex over another. This shows that for CAH girls, virilization of behaviour, virilization, I don't know what it is also incomplete. This means that there must be other influences on gender development, e.g., peers or parents. Correlating hormone levels on gender behaviours in normal populations. Recently, researchers have looked for possible relationships between hormone levels and gender differences using physiological markers which go with hormone exposure, E.G. The ratio between the length of the second index finger and fourth ring finger. Typically, women have a higher 2D, 4D ratio with their index finger longer than their ring finger, whereas men typically show the reverse pattern. My boyfriend told me about this a long time before I read it in the psychology book. He was trying to work out whether I was a man or not. I'm not sure whether I should be worried about this. Ooh, good name. Romsayer and Troche, 2007. Asked 423 male and 312 female university students to complete a BEM SRI to measure their gender role orientation and measured their 2D/4D ratio. We found a significant result in men only. Those who had a more feminine score on the BEM SRI also had a 2D/4D ratio pattern which indicated lower exposure to androgens and higher exposure to estrogens in utero. The implication is that masculinity may be related to the level of prenatal hormones the fetus is exposed to. However, the differences are small, and while it shows a relationship between hormone levels and gender-related behaviour, we cannot conclude that hormone levels cause masculinity or femininity. The IDA, nature-nurture. Always good one to go for. This is my nature-nurture face. Biological explanations emphasise the role of nature. However, they ignore the role of social factors in the development of gender. There is considerable evidence from the meta-analysis by Litton and Romney, 1991, showing that social influences from parents are important in gender development. There is also considerable evidence from biosocial theory that the best way to understand gender development is by looking at the interaction between biological and social factors. Erdey, 2000, suggests that biology sets a limit to the gender development by affecting how sensitive the child is to male or female socialization. Again, same sort of similar points from before. Evolutionary explanations of gender. Section. Sorry guys, it's been a long day. Evolutionary psychologists argue that gendered behaviour and personality characteristics have their roots in the past, and that gender differences exist today because in the past certain characteristics led to advantages in terms of survival and reproduction. Parental investment theory, Trivers, 1972, argued that behavioural differences in men and women evolved due to different reproductive strategies which led to the highest reproductive success in the past. Trivers noted that for males, each offspring required little parental investment beyond the moment of fertilisation of the female. A male's best chance of reproductive success would be to produce as many offspring as possible through mating with as many fertile females as possible. In contrast, reproduction for the human female involves considerable investment. Survival of a child is more likely if there are two parents around to provide protection and food. The best reproductive strategy for female is to carefully select a powerful and resourceful mate who will help her raise her offspring. This just sounds like an elaborate theory created by a cheating man as an excuse to his wife. Parental investment and behavioural differences. Mate choice. Men should look for partners who are physically attractive, whereas women are additionally interested in the resources a man might provide. The evolutionary explanation for this is that males should select women who are more fertile and healthy. Smooth skin, glossy hair, red lips, and thin waist are all signs of youthfulness and hence fertility. Females also look for physical attractiveness in a partner, but they are concerned to find a mate who can provide for them. Standard AO2 evaluation. Wainfirth and Dunbar, 1995. Hey, I was born that year. Analysed 900 personal advertisements from 4 USA newspapers. They found that 44% of males sought physical attraction, whereas only 22% of females did. 50% of women describe themselves as attractive, compared to only 34% of men. Males were 1.7 times more likely to advertise earning power and wealth than women. The predicted difference in how males and females advertise themselves to the opposite sex was confirmed, which supports evolutionary theory. And Singer, 1993, found that men are attracted to women with a low waist-to-hip ratio. 0.7 was seen as ideal with small waists, and that this supports evolutionary theory because it shows that men are most attracted to women who have childbearing potential. My childbearing hips. Sexual behaviour. Differences in sexual style. Getting a bit frisky for psychology, isn't it? May lead to improved reproductive success for males and females. Promiscuity may be the best strategy for males, as this would enable them to leave large numbers of offspring. In contrast, choosiness would be more beneficial for females, as a carefully selected mate would be important in ensuring the survival of their few precious offspring. This may explain the differences seen between men and women in their readiness to engage in casual sexual encounters. Men are just assholes, really, aren't they? It's written by a man as an excuse for, sorry, I'm a dick. Clark and Hatfield, 1989 and 1990. Male and female university students were approached by strangers of the opposite sex and asked them to either go out with them that night or to have sex with them immediately. Okay, someone had some good balls to just walk up to people and ask that. They found that although 50% of males and females agreed to go out that night, none of the women agreed to have sex with a stranger, whereas 75% of men agreed. No surprises there, guys. This supports evolutionary theory because it shows that men are more likely to have promiscuous sex. However, there is also evidence that promiscuous sex is not the best strategy to ensure pregnancy and successful child rearing. Rearing? Rearing. Oh, I'm going to wear that chart. Rearing. Sternglands? We're going with Sternglands. Sternglands and Nash, 1988, suggests that males who have one-night stands are unlikely to leave a woman pregnant because the odds of conception are much reduced compared to a pair bonded couple having regular intercourse. They also argue that a baby would be less likely to survive without two parents to care for it. This contradicts oh god, I just spat over there, excuse me. This contradicts evolutionary theories that suggest that promiscuity may not lead to reproductive success for males. Differences in aggression and size between men and women. Sexual dimorphism. Parental investment theory can help explain size differences between men and women. In evolutionary terms, a female's best approach to mate choice is to be choosy. This means more males would need to compete with other males to be reproductively successful. Therefore, characteristics that lead to males being successful in competitions or fights will be passed into the gene pool. So larger males with strength, size and dominance would be more likely to survive and win mates over smaller, less dominant males. Personally, I quite like my small, less dominant male, but personal preference. Holloway et al. 2002 says that evolutionary theory can explain why human males are 1.15 times bigger than human females, as larger, more dominant males are more likely to reproduce. Further support comes from the finding that male chimpanzees tend to be 1.3 times bigger than females, and male competition for mates is greater than in humans. Nature Nurture Rider, no surprises there. Biological and evolutionary perspectives see gender differences as genetic. This places them on the nature side of the argument. Some researchers take a hardline view, suggesting that all sex differences in behaviour are rooted in biological mechanisms. Others have taken a softer view, arguing that genes predispose men and women to act in certain ways rather than programming them, which allows for some environmental influence. Determinism. The hardline view above is deterministic, as it implies that all men and women have little choice over their behaviour. Women are naturally nurturers, men are naturally aggressive. Some psychologists have argued that this is why equal opportunity policies in the workplace are doomed to fail, and as such this research is socially sensitive. I don't even know what to say about that without being offensive, so we'll leave it. The biosocial approach to gender development, including gender dysphoria. Biosocial, come on, it's always just one of those, oh, we just agree with everybody to keep things easy. The biosocial theory suggests that gender development cannot be explained by looking at biological or psychological factors alone, but is best explained by looking at the interaction between these factors. Biological factors include genes, XX and XY, and the role of prenatal hormones like testosterone in producing male or female characteristics in the newborn baby. Social or cultural factors begin at birth with the labelling of the baby as male or female. It also includes the socialising effect of parents, peers, and wider society. Labelling leads to different paths for socialisation for boys and for girls. However, the boys and girls are expected to behave depends on the cultural views of masculinity and femininity. Money and Erhard, 1972, predicted that social factors were most important in gender development, and the gender development of a child could be changed through socialisation if the change took place before 2 to 3 years old. However, the study of Bruce Reimer contradicted this, as Bruce reverted to a male identity after puberty. Very controversial story, good video on YouTube about it, worth a watch. More recently, biosocial theorists, early 2000, have suggested that biology sets the limits to the flexibility of gender by influencing how sensitive the child is to female or male socialisation. This helps to explain the case of Bruce Reimer, as his initial exposure to androgens meant that he was not as amenable to the female socialisation process. Similarly, a girl with CAH who has been exposed to high levels of testosterone prenatally is likely to be less sensitive to female socialisation process. A boy who has not been exposed to normal amounts of testosterone may be less sensitive to male socialisation. Gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria is the belief that you are trapped in the wrong body and should be a member of the opposite sex. According to the DSM-5, there must be no clear biological conditions such as androgen insensitivity syndrome or hermaphroditism. We can assess the value of the biosocial theory by evaluating how well it explains gender dysphoria. Number 1. Psychological explanations. Parenting style may be responsible for a child's gender dysphoria through the process of operant conditioning. Parents reward their children for cross-gender behaviour, e.g. playing with girls' toys or dressing in girls' clothes, which may lead to gender dysphoria. Mitchell, 1991, measured maternal reactions to feminine and masculine behaviour in boys with gender identity disorder, clinical controls and normal controls. Using a structured interview, mothers were asked about their responses to masculine and feminine behaviour, e.g. peer preferences, toy play and dress-up play. The mothers of the boys with gender identity disorder were more encouraging of feminine behaviour than the mothers in both control groups, and they were also significantly less encouraging of masculine behaviour than mothers in the two control groups. However, these parents had already asked for clinical assessment, which means that they are concerned about their child's gender identity development. As such, it is not possible to say that reinforcement of cross-gender behaviour caused the child's gender identity disorder, or whether the mothers were responding to pre-existing, perhaps biological characteristics of the child. This study shows that the biosocial approach might provide a better way of understanding gender dysphoria than a purely psychological approach. Ooh, quality's much better with the light on, isn't it? Actually debatable. Biological explanations. Hormones and genes. Transsexual gene. Hare et al. 2009 in Australia compared the DNA of 112 male to female transsexuals with 258 normal males, and found that they were significantly more likely to have a longer version of the androgen receptor gene than a normal sample. This genetic abnormality decreases the influence of male hormones in the developing fetus. In particular, it under-masculinizes the brain during its development in the womb. Male to female transsexuals would therefore have a more feminized brain, and this explains why they are more likely to have a female gender identity. This supports the notion that gender dysphoria has a biological or genetic basis, and that the biosocial approach has a limited value in explaining gender dysphoria. Twin studies. Halens et al. 2012 studied twins, one was diagnosed with gender dysphoria. Of the 23 monozygotic twins, the researchers found 9 pairs, 39%, were concordant for GD. In contrast, none of the 21 same-sex the 21 of the same-sex dizygotic twin pairs studied were concordant for GD. Although the sample size is low, this does indicate a genetic basis for the condition. However, the concordance rate for MZ twins is not 100%, as it would be if the condition was determined entirely by genetics, providing evidence for the role of environmental factors. This shows that the biosocial model, which considers the interaction between biological and environmental factors, might provide a better explanation. Nature-nurture IDA again. I swear pretty much every IDA is nature-nurture. This is a continuing debate about the cause of origins of gender dysphoria. The biosocial approach is valuable as it recognises that there is a complex interaction between nature and nurture. Children may be born with a biological predisposition towards developing gender dysphoria, perhaps because of their genetic makeup or prenatal exposure to hormones. However, interacting with this biological predisposition are later socialization experiences, which guide children's gender-related identity and behaviour, e.g., a reinforcing role of parents and peers in gender development. Disentangling the contributions of nature and nurture is extremely difficult. Culture. In some cultures, cross-gender identity and behaviour is not seen as needing clinical intervention, e.g., some cultures have more than 2 genders, e.g., in India, it is estimated there are 5 to 6 million Hijra, a third gender who are typically biologically male but live as females. They experience less distress typically associated with deviating from a male-female gender role, suggesting that the distress often associated with GD in Western cultures is not caused by the disorder, but may instead result from social disapproval. This shows the importance of understanding the interaction between biology and social factors. Don't really get why people hate on gender mixed up people anyway. Who cares? It's their choice. They're not hurting anybody. Can't we all just love each other? Section 3. Social influences on gender. We're nearly there, I swear. We've got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages left. Social influences, e.g. the influence of parents, peers, and media. According to the behavioural approach, gender roles are learned through socialisation and upbringing from parents, peers, and the media. There are 2 important types of learning. Operant conditioning, providing positive reinforcement for some kinds of behaviour, e.g. playing with cars, and discouragement, such as teasing, but from others, such as playing with dolls. That doesn't make any sense, but yeah. If you play with cars, you're like, oh, look, he's playing with cars. And people goes, ha, lady boy. That kind of stuff. Kids are cruel, aren't they? Behaviour which produce positive consequences, e.g. praise, are more likely to be repeated than those which produce unpleasant consequences. Parents may positively reinforce their daughter's feminine gender role by praising her when she plays in a caring way with her dolls. Negative reinforcement is also rewarding as it allows a person to avoid an unpleasant situation. E.g., boys may quickly decrease the frequency of feminine behaviour, such as playing with dolls, to escape the disapproval of their peers. Gender inappropriate behaviour, which is punished rapidly, disappears. I'm tired now. This is a really long video. It's been here for like 39 minutes. This is ridiculous. Social learning involves observation of the same-sex role models and imitation of their behaviour, particularly when it is seen to bring rewards, vicarious reinforcement. In order to learn through imitation, the child must pay attention to the gender role, retain the memory of the gender behaviour, and they must have the ability to reproduce the behaviour. They must also have the motivation to act in a gendered way. If they don't really care about it, they're not going to reproduce it. Social learning theory suggests that children do not passively imitate role models, but are selective, choosing dominant and powerful individuals as role models. In young children, the main role models are parents and older siblings. Later, peers act as role models. Social learning also occurs through wide agents of socialization, e.g. television and internet. Great, that's another way to, just scare your parents away from, get off the internet! You can turn into a zombie! Okay, just say so. Direct reinforcement. Litton and Romney, 1991, carried out a meta-analysis of 175 studies, 158 of which were from the USA, with almost 28,000 participants which considered parental treatment of boys and girls. Findings. Although there was no difference in the amount of communication and warmth parents had between sons and daughters, parents rewarded boys and girls differently for taking part in different types of activities. E.g., boys were rewarded for doing outdoor tasks, whereas girls were rewarded for helping with indoor housework. Fathers were significantly more likely to treat their sons and daughters differently. I told you I was tired. Differently than mothers. E.g., fathers were more likely to correct their sons when they played with girls' toys. This shows that parents, particularly fathers, are important social influences on gender roles through the different ways in which they reinforce behaviour for boys and girls. We've still got a lot to do. Observational learning. Faggot. Faggot. 1992. Compared gender stereotypes of children brought up in different kinds of families. 27 families were classed as egalitarian, where childcare, housework and paid work were shared equally between parents. 42 were classed as traditional, where the father went out to work and the mother looked after the children at home. At age 4, the children took part in a series of gender labelling tasks in which they were asked who should do various tasks, e.g. taking out the rubbish or cooking. Children from traditional families produce significantly more gender stereotyped answers, e.g. saying that a woman should always do the cooking and men should drive the car. Well, have you known I'm a very good driver? This supports social learning theory as it shows that parents act as an important role model for a child's gender behaviour. Direct reinforcement. Oh, I've got another good name here. Langlois? Langolus? Langler, and Downs, 1980, observed children playing naturally in a laboratory setting. They compared peer and maternal reactions to preschoolers' play with opposite gender toys. Findings! When boys played with girls' toys, the mothers accepted this, but their male peers ridiculed and even hit them. I told you kids were horrible. You're filthy creatures. This shows that direct negative reinforcement by peers is important in gender role development. E.g., if a boy is punished by his peers for his feminine behaviour, he is likely to stop, and the end of the teasing will be rewarding. Some researchers suggest peer influence may be more important than parental influence in developing gender behaviour. Television. Observational learning. Wober, 1987, investigated the influence of TV on gender role by looking at children's perceptions of male and female occupations. 334 child members of the UK TV viewing panel aged between 5 and 12 years were asked about the occupations of male and female TV characters as well as their own career aspirations. Typical jobs carried out by women on TV included serving in a shop, taking care of children. Men were seen as working machinery and piloting aeroplanes. Findings. The children's own career aspirations showed clear links to the gender stereotyped careers they have witnessed on television. This shows that children are influenced by observing the behaviour of role models on TV. 802. Reinforcement and social learning are concepts from the behavioural approach which assumes that gender roles are learned passively. One criticism of this approach is that it may overlook the child's ability to think for themselves and resist the pressure to conform to gender roles and develop more androgynous behaviour. This is annoying me slightly. Is that better? This is really making a difference. You get to see more of my lovely face. Nature-nurture idea. No surprises there. Social factors do not provide a complete explanation for gender development. There is considerable evidence to show the importance of biology. E.g., the case of David Raymer shows that a person cannot learn to be another gender, and that biology does seem to be more important. The biosocial model suggests gender development is best understood as an interaction between biological and social factors. Biological theorists like Erde 2000 have suggested that biology sets a limit to the flexibility of gender by influencing how sensitive the child is to female or male socialization from parents, peers, or the media. Ooh, last section, cultural influences on gender role. Now, I can guarantee it's going to be horrendous because we had an essay question on it the other day and I couldn't remember anything about it, so obviously isn't that interesting. So, here we go. Culture refers to the knowledge, beliefs and values shared by a society that are passed through generations. The culture that people live in can influence their gender roles. Culture can be classified according to whether they are traditional or egalitarian, and individualistic or collectivist. Cultures where there is some choice and flexibility over gender roles have been classified as egalitarian, as men and women have greater gender equality. In traditional cultures, gender roles are clearly defined and it's more difficult to make choices outside of these roles. In individualistic cultures, masculine traits, like competitiveness, are valued, whereas in collectivist cultures, feminine values, like nurturing and obedience, are valued. Studying gender in different cultures helps us to tease out the roles played by biological factors and socialization in gender development. If socialization is the main factor, as the behavioural approach suggests, we would expect to observe variation between cultures in terms of the roles taken by men and women. However, if biology is the main factor in determining gender development, we would expect to find similarities across cultures in the roles expected of men and women. If gender is produced by the interaction between biological and cultural factors, some aspects of gender development should be universal, but others are likely to differ. Margaret Mead, 1935, studied 3 tribes in Papua New Guinea who could be classified as living in traditional society and found that their interpretations of gender role were very different to those in Western society. In the Arapesh, men and women behaved in a way that fitted the Western stereotype of feminine behaviour. In the Mungadamore, both sexes behaved in a macho way. Mead was most interested in the, Tamboli? I don't know. As their gendered behaviour was the opposite of that expected in Western society. The implication of Mead's work is that it challenged the widely held view that gender differences resulted purely from biological sex and showed the importance of cultural factors in gender development. Whiting and Whiting, 1988. 6 culture study. Whiting and Whiting observed children in their natural environment in USA, Japan, Philippines, Kenya, India and Mexico. Findings. In all cultures, girls were more nurturing and boys showed more dominance, but boys and girls were socialised differently from each other. Boys spent more time with fathers and girls with mothers. Boys were encouraged to achieve and be independent, while girls were encouraged to be nurturing and obedient. Differences in treatment of boys and girls were most apparent in India, Mexico and Japan. The implication of this is that biology and socialization play a role in gender development. Some differences occur in all cultures, so are probably biological. However, that doesn't make any sense. However, differences in socialization can magnify these differences. So in countries where boys and girls are treated differently, gender differences are greater than countries where they are treated similarly. Last page. I'm been at this for 49 minutes and 57 seconds. Oversimplification of culture. Tager and Good, 2005, compared ideas about masculinity of males living in northern and southern Italy, and found that northern males held less traditional ideas about masculinity than males from the south. This shows that culture is difficult to define and that differences in gender role may be greater within a specific culture than between different cultures. Importance of biological factors. Omar et al. 1975 show that young boys show higher levels of competitiveness, aggression and dominance and rough and tumble play than girls in all cultures studied. This difference is seen in countries as diverse as Switzerland, Ethiopia and the USA. The implication of this work is that the similarity between very different cultures suggests that some gender differences must have biological origin. Oh, we've got a different IDA. Issues in cross-cultural research. Most studies are conducted by Western psychologists, and interpretations of other cultures will be biased by expectations, or responses will be misinterpreted if they are not native speakers and familiar with the culture. This limits the theoretical conclusions that can be drawn from the work. There are several problems with modern cross-cultural research. E.G. Studies which use tests and scales developed in the West may be meaningless outside of the culture in which they were developed. This limits the theoretical conclusions that can be based on their use. Good old nature nurture. This topic allows for a careful examination of the debate. The evidence shows that neither culture nor biological factors alone can explain gender development, and that an interactive approach is most effective. Recent refinements to the biosocial theory explore the interaction between biological and social influences. Early 2000s suggests that biology sets the limit to the flexibility of gender by affecting how sensitive the child is to female or male socialization provided in different cultures. Finished. That was the whole basic pack that they gave us to learn. Let's see. Oh, yeah. A2 Psychology, Unit 3, Gender. So, next topic. Probably gonna do aggression. Not now though. I'm gonna go have a milkshake and cry for a little bit.